stuff going on in Google Hangouts, which you couldn't actually see. So, Grant is going to introduce something from the show.
Well, I'm sort of going to introduce it, and I'm going to hand it over to someone else. So we're going to try and strike a balance between informality and incompetence. Leah, do you want to start? Is this a good time to start the YouTube stream?
It is, and it has started.
Sounds great. Okay, so then I'd just like to, without further ado, just hand over to Eric Leonardson and let him. He unfortunately he was going to be here, and as things happen, he wasn't able to be. So he's with us like this. Eric.
Yes. Thank you, Grant, and thank you, Leah, and hello and greetings, everyone from Chicago. I'm sorry I can't be there in a physical sense, but electronically, it is my pleasure to be with you today for this panel on advances in eco-sensing and the soundscape. And it was titled, when I proposed this early this year, or was it the end of last year, as a virtual panel. So we're living up to the proposal as it stood back then. So, it's also my pleasure to be a part of this conference, as Balance-Unbalance is one of the more urgently needed and inspiring and also memorable conferences I've had the pleasure of or experience of participating in over the past several years. I think I'd also like to thank the organizers and sponsoring institutions for the support and vision, as well as the panelists who have agreed to participate and have taken their own precious time to prepare and discuss these topics with you. So, but before I introduce the panelists, I'd just like to speak about the topic a little bit, eco-sensing and the soundscape. We believe the idea and ongoing activities of these courses and collaborations will offer some very useful resources for students and teachers, particularly for those who aim to implement a blend of acoustic ecology and the DIY hacking aesthetic of new media, especially in a post-secondary art school and design school curriculum. So eco-sensing started as a course by Lindsay French and I over at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, SAIC, back in 2015. It was joined by architect and SAIC professor Linda Keene and her eco-design course, as well as our colleague and Leo Barclay from Griffith University in Southeast Queensland at that time. The term eco-sensing was devised by Lindsay and I when we proposed a team talk course at the school back in 2014. At the time, we were teaching two different courses. I was teaching field recording and phonography in the Department of Sound, and Lindsay was teaching a course titled Sensing the Landscape over in Art and Technology Studies. So our interests in sound and hardware hacking, landscape, architecture, public engagement, and ecology were all overlapping. And at the urging of our department, the chairs suggested we pursue a team talk course. And so the concept and experiences of Soundscape were also informed by my participation in the founding of the World Forum for Acoustic Ecology back in 1993. So also a key motivator was leading a free public event in 2014 that I called Our Sonic Playground at the invitation of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. This offered a chance for us to discover how we could engage our students and members of local sound art and acoustic ecology community in actively engaging museum goers in listening, as well as ubiquitous technologies and various aspects of their acoustic environment. discussed this later in 2014 at a symposium on urban soundscapes and critical citizenship at the University of Limerick. And subsequent to that, I published an essay on this later in the Journal of Urban Cultural Studies with a focus on our sonic playground. I'd be happy to refer you to that, or you can find that link to the journal on my own website. But it was at that time that I also published a piece for City Creatures, a blog, and the piece was titled Acoustic Ecology and Ethical Listening. And so that connected me with my colleague in landscape architect and also SAIC professor Linda Keene. So in the next year, Lindsay and I were awarded a team teaching award for the Eco-Sensing the Soundscape course. And it ran at the same time as Linda's eco-design course in the Department of Architecture, Interior Architecture, and Designed Objects. We'd also met Lindsay at Balance-Unbalance at Arizona State University that year. And so she was able to actually physically join us as a visiting artist. And so, and also participate in our first eco-sensing panel discussion that year in 2015. And so with all those experiences, we were really impressed by Leah's River Listening project. And this formed the basis for putting our course ideas and activities together. And hence, we have the advances in eco-sensing and soundscape. So moving forward in time, and more recently, Lindsay and Leah and Linda and I have been collaborating together, teaching, leading sound walks, and engaging our students in activities, along with Amanda Gutierrez and Norman Long, and other teaching artists in Chicago, to produce sound walks as well as media art productions that deal with the practice of and the acoustic environment or soundscape. So, so this panel will address particular ways that sense of place manifests in both objective and subjective ways, qualitative and quantitative, to creatively use and to communicate and collaborate in a soundscape approach that helps us restore and build in a holistic way a better future. Sense of place is a compelling theme, I find. And in the book Place, The First of All Things by Tacita Dean and Jeremy Millar, they describe how strong sense of place is to us as individuals. Now, sense of place is not only synonymous with location and space. The sensing defies definition, actually, which might seem paradoxical or a conundrum. Paraphrasing, herein lies many of the paradoxes and conundrums that attract constant appraisal and reappraisal of the fundamental questions. Where am I? Where do I belong? Sensing operates continually by necessity on the unconscious level, with exceptions made for what we call cognition. 1/2 or more of the human population are in urban centers. These soundscapes define their sense of place. When you sense a place, what senses are primary to your experience of place? This question serves as an example of how a multi-sensory approach versus a visual one, inspired by acoustic ecology, movement started by R. Murray Schafer and the World Soundscape Project nearly 50 years ago, brings us together at this point in time. I think it also points to possible futures, as I had mentioned. So that's basically what I'm trying to address in our theme. And so at this point, I'd like to introduce our first panelist. But first, let me mention that our panel was supposed to have 6 people, including myself. Norman Long, unfortunately, was not able to participate. So at this point, we have coming up Amanda Gutierrez talking to us from Mexico City, followed by Linda Keene in Milwaukee, and then Lindsay French in Idaho. However, she hasn't been able to find internet connectivity, and so she has a video to present her portion of the panel. And then following Lindsay's presentation is Leah, and then we open it up for a Q&A or discussion with you over in Plymouth. So again, thank you for joining us. We hope you find this worthwhile. Thank you.
Hello. So my name is Amanda Gutierrez. I'm going to speak about part of my research, and also I have to mention that this research has started in Chicago, and I did sound walks in Little Village with teenagers from Elevarte a year ago, last summer, which it was part of the initiative that Eric started as well as part of the Night in the Parks. And that led to me a very, very strong sense of how the sounds can be explored not only by myself, but also in a collective way, and also as a teaching tool. And these observations were made during the year. I've been also analyzing the soundscapes in Pilsen, and also I incorporate Orlando. This year I moved to New York to develop the second part of my PhD research, and I'm looking specifically on the ethnic enclaves of the Mexican immigrants, and I found 2 specific spaces. So I'm going to start my reading, and I will back and forward, and I will show a video eventually. So this research focuses on the navigation of the soundscapes of ethnic enclaves in the urban environments of New York, specifically where the Mexican diaspora settled in 1960s. It's a very new, or 50s, 60s, it's a very new diaspora, it's not of old New York. It is possible to get a sense of segregation and cultural integration through sound. What does the local soundscape tell us about the growth or destruction of native enclaves? What sounds are missed in the native culture, and what sounds resonate? With the sounds of urban development or the sounds of a long-standing beauty? How does existing soundscape shape the process of adaptation? How the sounds frame the public perceptions of the environment? How can we perceive the soundscapes of the urban development? This investigation is constituted by a sonic analysis of the acoustic territories embedded in soundscapes from diverse communities into major neighborhoods in New York. Sunset Park in Brooklyn and East Harlem in Manhattan. These places convey more heterogeneous influence than the ones in Chicago, but geographically segregated from Manhattan, the economic district from New York. This paper will take into consideration the process of the sound walk as a field research tool with experience and identification of cultural qualification of sounds. I'm engaging to a closer observation
Amanda,
of sounds in the...
Hey, I'm very sorry to
Yeah?
interrupt. Could we just clarify here in the space whether you would like us to play the video at this time or later?
No, after I finish this very brief line, and I will. So
I'm very sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to be sure. Just let us know when you want us to play.
Yeah, and the intersection and adaptation of the immigrant dwelling and these effects of urban development. Today I will present the video documentation of Sunset Park. So the video goes now of the sidewalk. In this video, we will observe and to listen to soundscapes of Sunset Park, describing the sonic integration of several immigrant cultures, such as Chinese, Puerto Rican, Irish, and the Mexican, sharing the urban territory of Brooklyn. On the other hand, I also acknowledge the stormy cultural enclaves of East Harlem and Manhattan, taking in consideration the historical relationships with the Hispanic culture, mostly Puerto Rican and Mexican. In both cases, the song walks describe their relationship with other enclaves, as well as my embodied listening experience as a woman of color and an immigrant, as an immigrant as well, Mexican immigrant. Both walks approach the superfluous practice of the derive or the intuitive dreaming through varied ambiances of a landscape reacting to what is here and observed. This research is in the earliest stages and constitutes an integral part of my PhD dissertation, entitled The Construction of the Immigrant Identity from the Analysis of Placemaking and its Oral History. In this stage of my research, I'm incorporating a photo essay study that emphasizes the placemaking process of the Mexican enclave.
So Amanda,
yeah?
I apologize again for interrupting. It's probably worth it though. We're getting a little bit of reverberation from your voice. And we think that if you could mute your speakers, right? So leave your microphone, but turn the volume of your speakers to 0. Perhaps that will sharpen you. Could we try that?
Is that better?
It is much better, I think. Is that better in the room? Yes, thank you. That's a big help. And the video looks great. Thank you.
Okay. So coming back, certain cultural codes are invisible for the camera. Therefore, only by listening and experiencing these environments, which I codify as distinctive elements, embedding the appropriation of the cultural space. The use of the walk as an instrument allows me to embody the space while being aware of my own cultural identity and gender, a subjectivity that I can translate into my own binaural sounds, recordings, and the 35mm photographs. These audio databases will be translated into 2 art projects. The first one as a single stop-motion animation created with the photo montages of the sound walks and, of course, the soundtrack of those recordings. And the second one as a virtual reality journey to be created during the spring 2018. In both projects, the soundscapes are the factual basis which cements the conceptual relationships with the idea of placemaking. So as we can see in the video that I'm presenting now, those are observations with a camera. And as I mentioned, the camera sometimes is blind of what I hear. And it's also very codified by me being Mexican. I can understand certain codes that I observe with other walkers that also, Mexican-American, they can understand those codes. But certainly it can be missing by someone who is not or doesn't belong to that culture. What I found interesting in Sunset Park is that it's a mix of cultures. It's Chinese, Puerto Rican, Irish, and Mexican. So there are so many cultural codes in the sound that it's difficult for me to understand all of them, but all of them are translated. So you can see, as you see on my photos, food menus in three languages, or you can hear 3 different sounds. Of course, I don't understand Mandarin, and there are certain things that I will be missing. But it's interesting to understand that this is 3 enclaves living in one single place. What I'm going to do next in this part of the process during my research will be mapping as well, because I think mapping gives a very interesting geomapping, a very important observation of the space. Where is it? From which street to which street? From what side to what side, east or west? And that's very important because historically speaking, Brooklyn has been divided as well as other neighborhoods that we know in Chicago. The difference is that I'm observing is that the immigrant communities clash. Whether in Chicago, in my observations, is that they are extremely divided by layers or by even divisions of the urban planning, right? The urban planning decides, the infrastructure decides, like bridges, trains, factories. And that's something that I want to emphasize when we walk. The walking experience and the sonic experience is one of the most subtle, but also the sonic experience brings to me and to my students when we walk through the space, the invisible layer that the camera cannot. And those sonic layers can be translated and can be analyzed back into the classroom. And I think those sonic layers can be very powerful tools to understand cultural, the cultural diversity in the cities, but as well as how segregation is very visible in urban environments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank
Amanda. That was great. Eric, you're hiding behind a slide there.
Yeah, I'm flipping my slides. I think we have Linda up next.
Great.
And I'll let Linda do her own introduction at this point, just to move things along, okay?
Okay, thanks, Eric. And I want to thank you, Grant, and Dr. Barkley for inspiring me to take this course of study. I am an architect and a professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I work on green initiatives between Milwaukee and Chicago. And I have been teaching eco design for about 10 years. And when meeting with Eric and getting excited about the layering of sound onto the types of study that architects are seeking, really brought this together. So this is a story about Riverworks Chicago, which is an interactive transient sound mapping and community engagement series of classes, fall and summer, that reimagine and visualizes a sustainable world above and beneath the surface of the Chicago River. Challenging engagement with water, the water cycle, water habitats, water conservation, water consumption, and water quality, students begin to activate new understandings and make new connections between the public and the Chicago River as a healthy, working, and recreational ecology. It's become a great vision and goal of the city. Now, Chicago, like most cities, began by the side of the river with a biodiversity of life, insects, flora, fauna, animal, and people. But most residents today, coming into Michigan Avenue and seeing Great Lakes, have no idea how river ecology has been radically altered by urban development. The Chicago Bridge Museum shows the picture on your right, which is the original timber, wetland, river tributaries and lake that the city was built upon. On the left is really a 1900s map where the Chicago River, which runs from the north to the south, used to find its mouth into Lake Michigan, was reversed. And so actually pooled the fresh water from Lake Michigan to help clean the pollution of the city through an expanded South Branch and sanitary ship canal to the Mississippi, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. So introducing this story of how water is affected by human development and what remediations can occur, we use a actually student-developed e-learning device called Next.cc, which introduces water and water-related activities. So students began to look at not only the water cycle, but their consumption, how to conserve water, the importance of watershed. Surprisingly, very few knew actually where water exists in the world, in ourselves, and in glaciers and lakes, oceans, rivers, but which ones are really drinkable. and what a small percentage of water in the world is drinkable, and why, if we look at the things we need to survive, air is first, water is second. So they began to develop a relationship with the water sources for the city of Chicago. They start leaving Great Lakes stencils around the city to get people thinking about the connection between the lakes. They create bathymetric models, watershed models, and begin to speak about the freshwater resource that they live at. In the course of this, we do study what other scientists have found and the remediation of the pollution in these Great Lakes, which is such a great water resource. It's 18% of the entire world's water resource, will take years to remediate. They began to create objects that will put these understandings in the public's eye. Cutting boards so that while you're preparing, you can think about water consumption and what's going on. While you're drinking liquids, you can actually turn these coasters over and learn facts about the river. And then the one on the lower right is actually the sections of the river and showing the locks that step from Lake Superior through all the different lakes to the sea. So eco-design starts with a series of river experiences. This is river walking. Students meet at the river and they begin to look at the interactions and at the associations and at the transformation of the river edge. They listen, they look, they observe. Most of these students who go to school in Chicago had really not spent this type of time at the river. Now, Chicago, through the wonderful work of Carol Ross Barney, has just done a series of river walks. And this is a series that they were able to study. This is the marina where you can pull up a boat. This is the amphitheater where you can sit and enjoy the city, the splash pad, and then the river jetty, where there are actually fish hotels that you'll hear from in a minute. The students look at the architecture of the city. They look at the little bits of green spaces that are left. They look at the material encroachment that is non-porous and industrial and by and large loud. That are starting to happen. So they create these maps. And then because of the great inspiration of Dr. Barkley and Eric Leonardson, we look at a series of sound and sound mapping and soundscapes exercises, where students investigate the data that a site presents in new ways, through data, through technologies. Here they're testing the water, which at the Bridge Museum, about half a mile from Lake Michigan, is still relatively clean. They use a new app, the Wiki Watershed, which is amazing, waiting for citizen scientists to add data where they can see the watershed of the region. They can zoom into the loop. They can do a study area and simulate different storms, how much water in a period of time. And then they can look on the left is how the water then would be, how it would fare. Would it be evapotranspirated, creating oxygen? Would it run off with all the pollutants straight to the river and the lake? And yes, that's the largest part. Would it infiltrate or actually be drained and filtered by the earth? They then look at a by Chicago students roof map, which started in 2006 with 5 green roofs. The city of Chicago now has the most, almost 5,000 green roofs, which is a way when you're building to actually mediate stormwater management and provide habitat. The students also took Chicago City of data and began to measure the green or Energy Star score of the buildings along the river. You can see which ones are still consuming more energy than others and how this mediates the water consumption. And then we begin to look at the layer that Amanda so beautifully spoke about earlier, about listening. Because listening is looking and looking deeply into data, but it's also listening. Can we hear birds? Can we hear water in the wind? Or can we only hear the sirens and the people walking and the machines in the city? The students under Eric's direction made hydrophones so that we could listen below the river in addition to above. They began to create more instruments that would speak to the public, get them listen to the fish. There it was, very quickly right there. It's very subtle, but some of them were just getting to begin to dialogue and archive sounds of fish under the water. 20 years ago, there were 2 species of fish, and the Chicago Bridge Museum now says that there are 76, so we know that we are working in the right direction. Students also study the flora and fauna and create a series of match cards. They create a coloring book for children to begin to associate with the biodiversity that can surround a river course. We go out on tenders in all weather, types of weather, and listen to what we can hear above and below the water. The students were really amazed because of the time that they were able to spend enjoying water. And in reference to John Cage's dip in the lake, students began to create a blog about the different water sources that they were visiting and listening to. And it was summer, so it was a great time to go around. The fountains were on. And so they did fountain recordings and created a Chicago Riverworks fountain map, which then eventually, I think we've got a little bit of sound. Let's try this one again. This is under the river, or under the fountain. And this one, which is going to be much larger, is when the jets get very high. So we also then compare the spectrographs of all of these, and it's amazing. Waterfalls throughout the city actually have a consistency. So we take these informations and we begin to map them on a sound map for the city of Chicago. And this is thanks to the APARI maps that are used globally now. We're starting to we want to map all along the river. But we also want to mix it with the sounds of biophony, geophony, and then anthrophony. Sounds like John Cage. So if you're brushing your teeth or washing your car, we can begin to celebrate water throughout the city. So we are going to continue these classes because the goal is to produce these different maps, to share them with the public, to actually take the many architecture boat tours and turn them into ecological boat tours that really talk about what you can see and learn and experience in this sense of place from the river. So in the end, water is H2O, but really there's a third thing, as Dave Lawrence once said, that nobody knows what it is, but it's actually magic, and it's only found in humans associating with the water that is in their city and their waterways, knowing who we are. So thank you. These are the sources if you want to look at these maps as they grow, and I appreciate being included. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
So we'll proceed now to Lindsay French. Her presentation is recorded or pre-recorded, and Grant, I think you have the video queued up to roll, right?
For sure. So we're going to play that here, and you guys may not get such a great transmission, but we'll see what we can do.
Hi, my name is Lindsay French. Thank you so much for having me. Today I'm going to talk about 2 public programming events that our Eco-Sensing in the Soundscape class produced during the fall of 2015 with Eric Leonardson. The first I will talk about was an event that was produced within a school exhibition, and the second event intersected other classes within the school as well as other communities outside of the school in the city of Chicago. So this is a poster for the first event that I'll talk about, Listening Below and Beyond. And you can see in the top there is an image of a couple of fish. This was taken from the Sweetwater Foundation aquaponics piece at the outside design at the Sullivan Gallery at SAIC. And this is a piece where we did a series of sound scores and performances from observations with the fish. Focusing on the non-human elements in the space, gallery visitors were guided to practicing for listening below and beyond the threshold of normal human hearing. Students led visitors through a number of groups and individual acts of listening that emphasized the human body as a listening device and activated the gallery as a site for increasing investigation. This was developed in collaboration with graduate students from the Arts Administration and Policy Department, and it was curated by Ben Fuqua, Flora Zhang, Liz Beatty, and Jamie Jin. I'm going to pause here for somebody to play the video showing just a couple minutes of documentation from that event.
Now we need everyone using our voices. And next, we're going to explore the room and find the item tone. Item tone is a resonance that exists in any room. And you discover it, you just use your voice. And we'll do this, but you walk around the room while you're holding one note or tone with your voice. You take any tone that feels comfortable for you to hold as long as your breath goes. And hold it tone, try to keep it steady. Whatever pitch you feel comfortable with is fine. But keep a steady tone as you walk around the room and listen. And what you might discover at a certain point, if you walk slowly, is there certain points in the room where you'll hit a kind of note that will resonate and amplify the sound of your voice. So you suddenly feel this resonant pocket or note in the room, and your voice will feel stronger or have more support. The way the sound travels from your mouth, bounces off the floor, to the ceiling, and the walls.
Okay, so we're going to go back to Lindsay's presentation.
The next exhibition that I would like to talk about is at the Headwaters, which took place in Gary, Indiana, in a section of the city called Miller. And this was at the Marshall J. Gardner Center for the Arts. And this was an exhibition that was conceived of in a previous semester with Lori Palmer and Sarah Ross, who both taught at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And it involved investigating and mapping the Calumet River, along which piles of petcoke, among other industrial materials, were stored. The exhibition concept was allowed to the waters of the Calumet River and their many arms and forms connect Miller Beach, Indiana with Chicago, and Chicago's many waterways in turn connect the region with global trade and movement of materials. Some of these materials become part of the river water, its bed, or its banks. Others are transformed into other things, like steel, fertilizer, and sheet salt. And others are temporarily stored by the river's edge, sulfur, salt, petcoke. Toxic petcoke refined from tar sands piped to the Chicago area from Canada is known to blow into nearby neighborhoods, causing people to get sick. This exhibition, located in the waters of the Little Calumet River, presents myths, photos, video, sculpture, books, sound, and events experience piped to the Chicago area from Canada is known to blow into nearby neighborhoods, causing people to get sick. This exhibition, located in the waters of the Little Balance River, presents photos, video, sculpture, books, sound, and events of the Balance River system. A boat trip down the Balance River, students and faculty contemplate with members of the Southeast Environmental Task Force in November of 2015 provided the foundation for the excavation. The group suspended the train and passed to a line where readily moving on the boat to map the state unit of the train. The laws collecting evidence from the documentation. The privileged position of being on the boat provided visual access to activities on the banks of the river that were otherwise inaccessible. And other forms of activity often referred to environmental or public responsibility. Many of the lives embodied experience and documented the river that way, and some of their work is shown in this exhibition. Work by locals or others relevant to this town of river and the waterways and natural sewers, as well as their partners, students, and communities. This is an image of one of the maps that was presented from the photography of that place. In addition to artwork, events, and documentation and laboratories, our class presented photographs work and events as well as the museum exhibition. In addition to this, another media exhibition by Erica Balance-Unbalance in 2022. Looking at exercises was included working with 15 routes by both Silva and Smith. Speech for Records by Paul Stockdale. Speech for Records is a diversity of performance in relationship. The piece raised questions about security control, the anthropogenic equivalent to natural materials, and human and non-human spaces. Speech for Records was performed for impact and was outcast by experience. There are recent investigations called Assembly Workshop to surface feedback. Through an alley for groups of reading and making, participants were invited to temporarily lose control of the natural feelings that future. The piece contained materials needed to make feedback, plants, trees, etc. Poetry was requested ahead of time and was then shredded to become part of the whole. Feedback was distributed to scholar events. The earliest led about a sound box that brought visitors to other features along the way. This included some hydrophone exercises by Eric Clemens and Simon Lucy, and this was at the bridge along the intersection of the way to the left. And along the way, they stopped at different areas to listen to the sounds around them, in the dark, breathing sounds, in the public space. And here are just a couple of images from that walk. And sound walk was an important part of this project below, and this was a really exciting experience. Some of these chapters were into an area and around the river that had been investigated by many classes previously and by community and working with them previously. Thank you so much, and if you have any questions, let me know about the interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lindsay. So hopefully you'll be able to see my little slide there. So up next we have Leah Barclay tuning in from Brisbane, as I recall. And so let's see if I can switch over to my slide here. I had a slide for you.
It's all right. I don't need a slide.
Okay. Yeah. Anyways, I'm sure you can introduce yourself. Thanks, Leah.
I can. Thank you, Eric. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I'm a little bit conscious of time because I know we wanted to allow some time for Q&A. So I might just check in with the room. There's a panel straight after. Is the Sound and Environment panel going to start right at, I don't even know what the actual time is now, but 5 minutes from now?
So we think that the next panel should start at 1:30.
1:30.
So
okay, so we've got a little bit of time. I'm happy to just compress my talk and just do a really short version of it so we've got time for Q&A, because these have all been such fascinating presentations. I have lots of questions and I'm sure the people in the room have questions as well, so it'd be nice to allow time for Q&A. So I might just do sort of a short version of my presentation and then we can jump into some questions. So hopefully you can see my screen sharing now, is that right?
Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm just going to talk really briefly about the River Listening Project, and I knew that Eric and Linda were going to touch on some of the elements of that project in Chicago, and it was really fascinating to hear how that project's progressed. It's such inspiring work, and to see all of the outcomes from the mapping as well, it's, yeah, really, really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. So River Listening started in 2014, really, and it's about exploring the cultural and biological diversity of global river systems through sound. So it's really grounded in Did I just lose you then?
We got robot voice for that last bit.
Right. Yeah, but it's also drawing on a whole range of emerging sciences, particularly new fields of biology, really exploring environmental patterns and changes through sound, which is, of course, very grounded in acoustic ecology. So the project has really been about recording and mapping different river systems and really getting emerging artists and communities to connect with their river through sound. And I've been constantly inspired by how fascinated people are with the sounds beneath the surface of the water. I mean, for me personally, I've been recording different river systems in parts of the world, and I'm constantly fascinated, but I've rarely had an experience where someone hasn't been quite enthralled with what's happening beneath the surface of the water. And what I find really interesting is, you know, we can look at the surface of this river, a river in the backwaters of Kerala, South India, and by looking at the surface of a river system, we really have no idea about the health of that environment. So I'm really looking at this idea of eco-sensing, in the context of freshwater environments, giving us access to this world beneath the surface. And sound is such a valuable tool to be able to explore that. So this work has ranged from urban river systems, as we've heard about, to very remote rivers flowing through different parts of Australia. This is the Mary River. And I've been privileged to collaborate with a lot of incredible scientists through this work. And what they've all been telling me from the start is that the classic methods that we're using to monitor river health and river restoration just aren't working and don't reflect reality. Capture and release and electrofishing, as you can see pictured here, are very invasive methods. And many of the scientists I'm working with have been embracing these new tools for understanding ecosystem health through sound. And the exciting thing is these hydrophones incredibly accessible and affordable now. So we can literally just put them straight in the river system and be recording and databasing these sounds. And the exciting thing is now we're able to identify a lot more of the species and really start developing these baselines and systems for understanding the health of a river through sound. So this has also happened in remote rivers, frozen rivers in Norway, to very rural rivers. And what has inspired me is that community members who have a very close relationship with their river system, who know it very well, when they listen for the first time and have this completely different sense of the environment, they're opened up to a whole different world of understanding this place that they've known for their whole life. This is Marilyn O'Connell on the Mary River, who's a turtle specialist, and she listened for such a long period of time, and it was that first listening experience that really changed the trajectory of her research, as has been the experience of many students that we've been working with on these projects. And what's also been exciting about river listening is this has crossed through a whole different fields, from undergraduate biology students using the river listening methods to start mapping ecological changes in the river system, to these are some of our composition and music technology students at the conservatorium who are doing hydrophone recording to make a new installation for World Science Festival this year. And I've been really inspired by working with these projects in the context of very young children as well. So this is a group of children on the Noosa River, hand making hydrophones in a similar way that Eric was making the hydrophones with students in Chicago. And then as soon as they've made the hydrophones, they're able to put them in the water and start recording. And again, these recordings are used in our evolving databases. These were some students from a very recent workshop at the University of Hull. And this was as part of a river listening installation in Hull as part of the Sound and Environments Conference, which is the focus of the next panel. And again, it was so inspiring to see how fascinated these students are with sensing beneath the surface. Now, I'm going to skip over a few of these things just so I can keep this fairly compressed. But one of the main outcomes that we're using all these recordings for is to create augmented reality sound walks. So essentially a sound map along the river with all the recordings that you can access through your mobile phone, walk along the river, listen to all those GPS tagged recordings over time, and also listen to live hydrophones, which has been a key focus of river listening as well, really listening live. And we don't have permanent hydrophone arrays in a lot of these river listening installations, but that's what we're working towards in the future. And these installations continue to evolve in different parts of the world as well. And I just wanted to quickly close by saying these kind of eco-sensing experiments in the context of this very art science work that has sort of this equal focus between using sound to understand the environment from artistic and scientific possibilities is happening in terrestrial environments quite a lot as well. We're running a lot of workshops using binaural recording techniques, and then also very remote sensing using fairly standard bioacoustics recorders as well, where we can log this data over very long periods of time. And I won't go into details with this, but most recently I've been collaborating with Grant Smith, who's in the room with you, who has been pioneering streaming technologies for the Raspberry Pi. That was an image from a recent workshop, which Eric was also participating in. And as I'm sure many of you know, Grant has just set up a fantastic stream in the North Devon Biosphere Reserve, solar powered, and very remote. I've been listening to this for most of the week from Australia. It's been raining and there's been fascinating insects throughout the night. And this is as part of a new collaboration we've launched called the Biosphere Open Microphone Network, which has various partners in different parts of the world. And you can listen to this stream via the Locust Stream sound map and zoom in there and see the North Devon Biosphere Reserve. And this is a project that we're hoping to integrate into a whole range of collaborations and education programs in the future. So I'll stop there, I think, and hopefully we've still got a little bit of time to open up for questions.
That's great, Leah. Thank you very much. That was really good. And so what I might do is actually just turn the Is that all right, Erica? Maybe I turn the laptop around.
Yeah, and thank you, Leah. Thank you, Grant. We have 25 minutes after the hour, so maybe we could take a couple questions.
Yeah, let me see if we can actually give you a remote sense of ourselves. So if I do, what do I need to click on? Yeah, that work? So if I move now, we get a few people. We can point it at some people. There's some people.
Hello all.
Yeah. There's a few more, but they're out of shot. So do we have some? Do we have quite? Oh, we did a test question. See if you can hear us. Any questions?
It looked like there was an app you were showing that said river listening. Was that an app? Leah.
Were you able to hear that question, Leah?
I can, yes. So yes, that is an app. Can you hear me okay?
Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
What have we lost? Let's check some.
You can't hear me?
Oh yeah, but maybe. Can you hear us?
Yes, perfectly well.
Oh great. Do you want to try that question again?
Leah, it looked like you were showing an app and you didn't really, you were starting to speed up then.
Yes, sorry, I was powering through that information. So yeah, we've used a whole range of existing platforms for the river listening soundwalks, including Reco and a platform called Echoes, which is developed by Josh Kopacek in London. And we've most recently launched a customized app called Orality, which is where all of the river listening soundwalks are going to live now. And that's also been developed in collaboration with Josh. So the name of the app is Orality. And that the two platforms that we've used in the past is Reco, so Echo with an R, and Echoes. There's a lot of apps called Echoes, so it's easier if you search echoes.xyz and you'll find it straight away.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
There are also several apps that show the spectrograms of your sound, which students find fascinating because it color codes the different frequencies and decibels. So if you're in an urban setting and a siren or the wind, and so you can kind of see these mediating together. It would even show you the sounds hitting leaves of a tree and how it filters them. So it's pretty interesting and beautiful.
Have you got a name for one of those? Is that a mobile app or something like Raven?
We use a Spectrum Reader, Spectrum View, Spectrum View. And there's a couple others. We have tried the Reco and the Echo. We are also experimenting with augmented reality so that if you have print, then you can hear the talk or hear the fish, whatever. So you're making that connection immediate.
Okay, nice. I thought I might have a question for Amanda, if that would be okay. Can I?
Yeah.
Is it possible? Yeah.
Yes.
So is that all right? Good. So I really liked the kind of how obvious you made it, that it makes a great difference who is listening and how they listen and so forth. And there is it's important who listens to whom and to what and so forth. And sometimes that nuance is lost, I think, in a kind of assumption that listening is a sort of generic activity that is almost a good thing to do in itself. And obviously, like in the visual arts, we have a very evolved and sort of complex understanding and sort of critical language to talk about these kinds of sort of difference, you know, and so forth. And I was just wondering, in your own practice, what your sense of whether your practice kind of resonates with other practices. Do you feel that there's a supportive environment for that kind of exploration?
Yes, I think social practices are part of that. In my artwork that I develop is very developed collectively, and I always take in consideration who are the listeners and the listeners who are part of the project. So as part of the New York City project, I developed a record, a vinyl record with senior citizens. And we did sound walks in Upper West Manhattan. And through our sound walks, we reactivate their memory. And then we developed this record that basically, on the same video page, you can see the cover. It's like the one video before that. And it's important to me, as you mentioned, who are the embodied, you know, team, who like how they can embody this in experience this place. For them, for example, every time when we did the sound walks, it took us 1 hour to make just a walk of 1 block. Because they have other kind of physical, you know, qualities, aspects that is not the same as a teenager who can walk 10 blocks in 1 hour, right? And how they perceive the sound is also very different from how a teenager perceives a sound. And in this practice that I'm developing social practices, and I think it's important to mention that the word of collective is it can be tricky, right? When is your artwork? When is the artwork of the other people? Is that an answer of your question? Can you hear me well?
Yeah, yes. For me, that's a really useful response. Thank you. I've just been reminded that it's come up to 1/2 So I'm just wondering if, Eric, we could ask you to wrap up. It would be nice to do more questions, but maybe we should try and keep to the plan here.
Well, I can offer a little concluding remark. My interest with this panel was to have this eco-sensing and the soundscape course, and what I'm offering you through this panel to be a resource that you could use in your own teaching. I'm making an assumption here that many in the room are teaching or involved with educational institutions, and so hopefully this presentation and discussion was effective towards that end. And I think if more time were available, we could talk more about discovering teaching moments and also parsing out some of the sort of unmentioned assumptions that are made about the environment or different listening practices. The list goes on. But I think in addition to the teaching part, how students can gain from this, and how us as teachers, researchers, scientists, and so on can gain from this content, I think it would also be helpful to discover and deploy teaching moments for policymakers. I think Amanda, Linda, and Leah would all agree with me, and we all have moments where we're doing that, and where we're raising these issues about the soundscape and how it is an indicator of ecosystem health, and how we study species and how our built environment affects the quality of life, and so on. So those who are in power and who are the decision makers and policy makers need to know about this too. So I'm hoping that we can spread the ideas, the information on that level as well. I might add also that I feel like I've had some success by working with the Chicago Park District and gaining actual funding support to employ teaching artists like Amanda and Norman Long in leading sound walks and for free for the public. And so that I feel like that is just one indicator or one step forward in changing public awareness and with the support of city institutions. And so this may serve as one model for achieving that goal. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, maybe I can just say thank you very much on behalf of everybody here. And maybe probably there's quite a few interested people and thumbs up. So maybe it would be okay to share email addresses or something with people who might want to find out more. Would that be okay with you guys?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Definitely. The
yes.
World Forum for Acoustic Ecology. There's also the Midwest Society for Acoustic Ecology in the U.S. These are groups that are set up to receive your questions and your participation, to join us as members and so forth. Okay,
fantastic. So thanks very much, Eric, and everybody. That's been a really nice conversation. And Leah, thank you for putting the Hangout together and recording it. I think there was a question. You have a link coming up. Is that right?
Yes, this has all been recorded.
Okay, great. If you send us the link, we'll share it.
Thank you, Grant, Leah, Amanda, Eric.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye then.